every morning I found out that there were some people who went back and forth to Birkenau every morning. And I filled bottles of water. I told them where my mother was, the barrack, the number, and I started again to argue with the SS. And I never heard from my mother again. I never know whether, I'm quite sure she didn't. She got the water or the notes I wrote. Somebody else took the water. This was the life in Auschwitz. And I started to hear of more and more terrible selections. And in the back of my mind, I knew that she could not survive this. November 1942. And we were told, I was told where I was working in that Wirtschaftslager that I wasn't needed anymore, that I had to go back to Birkenau, which I knew meant my death, because nobody could survive there in the winter. Once more, I spoke to a Czechoslovak political prisoner, a woman prisoner. And I told her, I was very friendly with her, many people were friendly with her, what had happened. And she said, you know, I just heard there was an opening somewhere in the agriculture department, in der Landwirtschaft. And she was working for the head SS officer of that department. And the next morning she came to me and she said, okay, I got you in. My life was saved once more. And I started to work in the agriculture department, in the accounting department, which was very ironic at the time. I had a smile on my face because I was never very good in mathematics. And I worked in that department in an office building which was just across the street from the main camp crematorium. So I saw that crematorium for the next 2 years. Sitting, looking out of the window, I saw it. And I saw the people go in, and I saw the wagons come out. And I must have, at some point, I don't know what it was, I must have made some sort of a remark in front of the SS officer who was my superior. And he simply said, oh, that place, das ist eine Ziegelfabrik. That is a factory where they produce tiles. I swallowed. I don't know what I had said to make him say that. And I worked there with other women in that office. And horrible, horrible things happened around us. We saw the men walk out in the morning to go to work, and the screaming and the yelling, and they came back bringing the dead men beaten to death. Because we knew that there were orders, you bring out so and so many people in the morning, you only come back with so and so many. Those were the orders.
How did you find that out?
Well, we knew, I knew people, women, who worked in other offices which were more serious type offices than the agriculture department, which were the political departments, and where whatever went on in Auschwitz was being written down. And that's why today, or right after the war, everything was known. The Germans kept track of everything they did, of everybody who was killed, of every number that was given to a person, of every transport, who went where, who was killed when, under what circumstances, everything. So these women knew a lot.
Now, you were in the same barracks as these women?
I was in the same barracks. Of course, they were not supposed to talk. But you did find out things. And I was also very friendly with a group of French prisoners who were not Jewish. They were political French prisoners, who in turn were in touch surreptitiously with French men prisoners, and who found out a lot of things, and who were able to give us a lot of political information, what was going on outside. Auschwitz, the Polish prisoners, the political prisoners, many of them were very politically active in little cells, and there were underground radios. There was a lot of political activity in Auschwitz. Some Jews were involved in it, many were not. But once you were there for a year and had somehow gotten yourself into a certain position, you had to have contacts because you couldn't survive without contacts. You couldn't survive without stealing and what was called organisieren, meaning acquiring things by theft, bartering, you name it.
What were some of the things that you did?
Well, being in the agricultural department, some people brought in from the garden commando, they brought in sometimes some potatoes, sometimes some fruit, which they smuggled in their pants. Everything was under threat of being killed. I was interested in getting news, and I got letters smuggled from the men's camp. I had some contacts there. This was the most dangerous thing you could do. Some letters were smuggled by German prisoners who were criminals, and they could be killed, or I could be killed, or we, whoever did this. Mm-hmm. There was a famous case, I don't want to mention it because it has been written up, of a woman who was in correspondence with a man. I mean, she had a relationship with a man, and the letters were found under his cap, and she was killed, and he was. It was I mean, there were terrible things happening, absolutely horrible things. And for me personally, it was a necessity for survival to know what was going on politically. Now and then the Germans, the SS, would have newspapers. It wasn't the most reliable information, but we knew how to read between the lines. But there were times that were so terrible in the camp. There were so many rumors of new selections coming, of people you heard who had disappeared and were taken to the selections in Birkenau. I still hadn't heard about my mother. Until finally one of the women who worked in the political department came to me and said, I didn't want to talk to you before, but I know that your mother was taken at the end of September. She told me that my mother had run away twice from the famous Block 25, which was the assembly block for those who were to go to the gas chambers, that she had run away twice. How this appeared in their notes, I have no idea. So I knew for sure. And even though I knew it before in my heart, those were the days where I went into a very deep depression. I didn't talk to anybody. At night I pulled the pillows and the blankets over myself so that nobody should talk to me. I didn't wash myself. I didn't want to eat. So those were the very, very harsh days. But I knew that I had to go on. And then on the outside, the news became a little more encouraging what we heard. Then came the famous day of D-Day, the invasion of Normandy, on June the 6th in the morning. At 6 o'clock, I was already in the office. I had to clean out the ovens, the heating ovens. I don't want to mention the word oven. I had to clean the offices before. And a Polish prisoner, political prisoner, non-Jew, came in and said, "I have news." And he told me. And he called me outside of the office into a little place on the side where he kept his brooms. He was a cleaner. And he said, "Here, have a little drink." And that drink was pure alcohol mixed with some citric acid and a little sugar.
At this point in time, were you able to know anything about the whereabouts of your brother?
Nothing. Nothing. But I know now, or heard much later, when I looked into archives and things, that with all the children and all the old people, he had been brought to Drancy, the famous assembly camp near Paris, and that he had been deported also towards the end of September. And of course, that was a children's transport. So, but I did not find that out in Auschwitz. The only thing I knew for sure was that my father was alive, because he wanted to go to the United States. And that is also why at the time when we were in France, we wanted to pick up some papers in unoccupied France, because somebody in the States had sent some papers. So I knew he was alive, and that of course gave me a big push to stay alive. But I had no idea where he really was, which turned out to be in Cuba. But on June 6, we were, of course, absolutely, June 6, 1944, we were absolutely elated. And even the Germans talked about it, but made a point of talking in front of us, saying, "Don't worry, we have, the Führer has a miracle weapon." But we were very, very hopeful. But then, in June, a new tremendous fire was burning in Birkenau, which we could see from our beds. And those were the Hungarian Jews that were coming in and that were being decimated. It was something terrible, even though we were still not anymore in Birkenau, but we saw it. The sky was red every evening, and the smell was horrible. And the stories that seeped through were something that, again, we were hopeful, but then again, we knew that, in effect, the order existed to do away with all of us.